Hey there. Picture this. The air is thick with the scent of olive oil and sun-baked dust. The hum of cicadas pulses through the walls. And you, yes, you, are about to live a day in the life of an average ancient Greek citizen. Not the kind with a marble statue in their honor, but the kind who spends more time dodging goats than philosophizing under cypress trees. Trust me, by the end of this, you'll discover a part of daily Greek life that'll make you rethink every toga party and golden myth you've ever heard. If you actually enjoy being dropped into worlds where the past isn't so glorious, go ahead and hit that like and subscribe. And seriously, take a second to comment where you're watching from and what time it is. I want to see if we've got night owls in Tokyo or early birds in Sao Paulo sharing this historical fever dream with us. Dim the lights, pull your blanket around you like a makeshift himation, and settle in. We're going to need all the comfort we can get for this trip back to the Mediterranean, where your greatest luxury is a breeze that doesn't smell like sheep. Your day as an ancient Greek begins not with a gentle alarm or even a motivational podcast, but with the sunrise roasting you alive inside what feels like a brick bread oven. Your house is a squat, wonky little box made out of sun-baked mud or hunks of rough stone. There's no glass, just a couple of wooden shutters rattling in the breeze, when there's a breeze. You share this space with your entire family, plus the occasional goat who's claimed the corner as its own, and whose boundaries are, let's say, flexible. Personal space. That's a myth, right up there with centaurs, and the idea that you could ever have a private moment. You wake up because the heat says so. Summer? Your body is marinating on a straw mat, every stone in those walls radiating last night's sun straight into your bones. Winter? The same walls become a meat locker, and your cloak is your only defense against waking up as a human popsicle. Forget memory foam. You get a thin mat, maybe stuffed with straw, maybe just a pile of reeds, and you fold up your cloak to serve as a pillow. If the lice showed mercy, you might have gotten some actual sleep, but don't count on it. There's no such thing as running water, unless you count your own sweat. So your morning routine is less refresh and rejuvenate, more haul a heavy clay jug to the nearest public fountain, and try not to drench your tunic or shatter your spine. If you're living outside the city, you're making a pilgrimage to the nearest well, balancing jars on your shoulders and muttering silent prayers to every minor god of pottery that you don't trip and lose a week's worth of hydration. You do not bathe in the morning. That's a luxury reserved for the end of the day, if you've got the energy or haven't lost the will to care. Maybe you splash some water on your face, rub a little olive oil onto your skin, and then scrape it off with a curved metal blade called a strigil. It sounds elegant, but let's be clear. It's the ancient Mediterranean version of exfoliating with salad dressing and a cheese slicer. There's no privacy during any of this. Your siblings, your parents, your cousins, and yes, that goat, are all right there, living and breathing and judging your technique. The communal living doesn't stop at sunrise. Your home isn't just for sleeping. It's also your kitchen, your dining room, your social feed, and your personal landfill. The street outside your door is where you pick up gossip, where you drop off trash, and where you get yelled at for tracking mud inside. You haven't even had breakfast, but your back is already aching. Your skin is sticky, and your tunic is clinging in places that defy geometry. And here's the kicker. This is still the easiest part of your day. If you're already fantasizing about air conditioning, buckle up. Breakfast in ancient Greece is a test of your willpower, not your taste buds. Your first meal is a hunk of barley bread, maza, so dense and stale it could double as a weapon in a pinch. It's made by pounding barley into oblivion, mixing it with just enough water to form a brick, and then baking it on hot stones or straight in the ashes. Imagine a granola bar without the granola, the sugar, or the joy. You might dunk it in watered-down wine, not for the buzz, but because the water straight from the well is a lottery ticket that sometimes pays out in dysentery. If you're lucky or rich, maybe there's a fig, a smear of goat cheese, or a handful of olives. But if you're watching this in your pajamas in 2024, let's be honest, you're not ancient Greek rich. You're getting the bread, and maybe it isn't crawling with yesterday's flies. There's no coffee, no eggs, no fresh fruit bowl, no honey. Unless your neighbor happens to be a beekeeper and you're on good terms. You eat fast, standing or squatting, no chairs, no forks, and definitely no mindful eating. You chew, you swallow, and you get on with the business of survival. If you're a woman, you're not even eating at the same time as the men. Women and children often eat after the men are done, which means you get to wait your turn for disappointment. Ancient Greece is famous for its banquets, its flowing wine, and its poetic odes to feasting. But breakfast doesn't even get a footnote. It's purely functional, dry, and sometimes faintly smoky from the ashes. Still, you eat every crumb, because you need the energy for the endless day ahead. The only thing separating you from total collapse is this ancient brick of barley, washed down with a splash of wine that tastes like disappointment and necessity. Cheers to survival. Once you've managed to choke down your portion of the world's saddest breakfast, it's time for hygiene, and I'm using that word very loosely. There is no soap, no peppermint toothpaste, no secret stash of cleansing wipes. Your morning bath, if you can call it that, is a quick rinse with cold water at the fountain or in your courtyard. If you live near a public bathhouse, you might be able to splash a little extra, but don't count on it. For most people, the daily routine involves slathering olive oil over your skin and scraping it off with a strigil, picking up as much dirt and sweat as possible along the way. Imagine giving yourself a spa treatment, using only pantry basics and a medieval cheese knife, all while making awkward eye contact with your neighbor. Hygiene is a public event. Privacy is for the gods. Teeth? No brushes, no toothpaste. Maybe you chew on a twig or rub your gums with ash or charcoal if you're feeling fancy. But mostly you just hope your teeth stay in your mouth until you're old enough that it doesn't matter. Body odor is everywhere. Deodorant doesn't exist. But if you've got a few extra coins, maybe you dab a little rose oil on your neck before heading out for a 5-mile walk in the boiling sun. By noon, everyone smells like a mix of dust, sweat, and desperation. Laundry is an ordeal. Clothes get beaten against river rocks. But if you're poor, that tunic might not see water for months. The standard is not clean. It's less disgusting than yesterday. Now comes the fashion show, ancient Greek style. Your wardrobe consists of exactly 2 options, the chiton and the himation, both just oversized linen rectangles that you wrap and pin with a brooch or tie with a sash. There's no tailoring, no elastic, and certainly no consideration for windy days. One aggressive gust, and suddenly your philosophical musings are on display for the entire agora. Underwear hasn't been invented yet, and bras are a Spartan fever dream. If you're a woman, you just hope your pins hold, and the linen doesn't betray you. Footwear. If you own a pair of leather sandals, you're among the lucky. Most people go barefoot, which means your feet are in an ongoing war with sun-baked stone, goat droppings, and whatever the market has left behind. Imagine a day spent walking across a grill in July, dodging donkey dung and broken pottery. That's your commute. There are no hats unless you're a farmer or a sailor, and the concept of sunscreen hasn't even been born yet. The sun here is relentless. Caring nothing for your philosophical ambitions, it will roast you without mercy. By midday, your shoulders are scorched, your feet are filthy, and your linen robe has adhered to you like a second, sweatier skin. Public nudity isn't scandalous. You'll see men at the gymnasium training in nothing but their birthday suits, and politicians giving speeches in togas that look like they're one sneeze away from a wardrobe disaster. If you happen to be wealthy, your tunic might be dyed a soft purple or saffron yellow, but most people wear sun bleached off, white or brown. Dyes are expensive, and no one's wasting royal purple on the guy who mends fishing nets. So you shuffle through your day dressed like a toga burrito, sunburned, sticky, and praying that your pin doesn't pop loose at the worst possible moment. The best part? You're not even halfway through your chores. You've survived the ancient Greek morning, and the day is only beginning. Now that your day is just getting started in ancient Greece, let's talk about your next big responsibility. If you're a free male citizen, especially in Athens or Sparta, congratulations. You've just been auto-enrolled in the military. Whether you're feeling heroic, or you'd rather invent the world's first coffee shop, from the moment you can swing a stick, your days are packed with drills, formation practice, and a series of lectures about honor, delivered by someone whose beard is twice as intimidating as you are. The sacred phalanx, yes, that iconic Greek battle formation, basically means you're expected to lock shields with the guy next to you and cross your fingers that he didn't skip leg day. Now, if you happen to be born in Sparta, say goodbye to childhood as you know it. At age 7, you're tossed into the agoge. Think of it as a boot camp designed by someone who thought regular boot camps were too soft. Starvation, whippings, forced silence, and a healthy dose of terror are all part of your daily diet. Only the toughest make it out, and even then, you're not getting a medal. You're just getting promoted to even tougher training. Athens is gentler, but don't get too comfortable. There, you're sent for 2 years of mandatory military school in your late teens. And after that, it's decades of being on call, just waiting for the city-state to need your sword or your body. No, you can't opt out because you're an ideas guy. Even Socrates, the original philosopher, literally had to fight in wars. Not with witty banter, actual weapons. And don't think you'll ever run out of things to fight about. There's always a conflict, Sparta versus Athens, Athens versus Persia, Sparta versus, well, anyone who looks at them funny or even a neighboring town that stepped on your metaphorical grapevine. War isn't a rare event, it's the background music to your entire life. Peace. That's just the awkward silence before the next brawl. Let's talk armor. If you're lucky or rich, you get a bronze helmet, a breastplate, greaves, a round shield, and a spear, all the hits. If you're less fortunate, you might show up in padded leather and a hopeful attitude, which is ancient Greek for "please don't put me in the front row." And here's a fun twist. You have to bring your own gear. That's right, it's the ultimate bring-your-own-bronze situation. Poorer folks either borrow, inherit, or just fight lightly armed, which in Greek translates to most likely to become a cautionary tale. When you're not actively at war, your life is still wrapped around the idea that, at any moment, you might be. Training, cleaning your weapons, debating battle strategy in the assembly, or, if you're really lucky, rowing one of those trireme warships for hours on end. Those legendary Greek fleets, someone has to paddle them, and it's probably you. There's no veterans' health care, no retirement plan, and definitely no therapy. You get scars, maybe a limp, and if you're lucky, a gravestone that says you were very brave. But if you think life as a man in ancient Greece sounds tough, just wait until you step into the sandals of a woman. In most Greek city-states, especially Athens, women's rights are about as generous as the portion sizes at a stingy taverna. You can't vote, can't hold office, can't own land in your own name, and you're barely allowed to leave the house without a male escort. If you're seen outside too often, people start whispering that you're a courtesan, or even worse, a Spartan. Picture your daily routine. You wake before dawn, not because you're an early bird, but because your to-do list is longer than Homer's epics. Spin wool, weave cloth, grind grain, fetch water, bake bread, manage slaves if your family owns any, and somehow raise children who will hopefully survive to adulthood. You're the household CEO, but without any pay, stock options, or even a thank you. Your social calendar is a barren wasteland. You don't go to the theater. You don't join the debates. The gymnasium? That's strictly for naked men to argue and show off their calves. You're mostly confined to the gyneconitis, the women's quarters, getting your news through a lattice window like some ancient version of scrolling social media from behind a privacy screen. Education for women is, well, let's just say, no one's going to quiz you on philosophy. If you're lucky, you pick up enough reading to manage household accounts. Otherwise, your entire curriculum is domestic arts. Geometry, rhetoric, the Socratic method? For boys only. Your main assignment is to marry well, produce sons, and stay as invisible as possible while doing it. Marriage typically happens in your early teens, often to a man twice your age, arranged by your father as if he's trading for a new goat. Love is optional. Dowries are required. Once you have children, your primary value is simply your ability to produce more. Now, before you start packing for Sparta, thinking it's some feminist utopia, let's clear that up. Spartan women are more liberated, yes. They're educated. They exercise in public, and they can own property, which shocks the rest of Greece. But their freedom comes at a steep price. The state is obsessed with raising warriors. Your main job is to give birth to strong sons. And if you can't, you might as well be invisible. If your husband dies, you can't inherit much. and you're not allowed to remarry unless the state gives you a thumbs up. Your options dry up faster than a Greek summer creek. So while the Greeks worship powerful goddesses, Athena, Artemis, Hera, in real life, women are expected to be silent, hidden, and as unremarkable as the background pottery. Now, let's talk about democracy, the supposed jewel in Athens' crown. Ancient Athens is always hailed as the birthplace of democracy. And, yes, that's technically true. But don't get excited just yet. Odds are, you wouldn't even get past the front gate. To vote in the Athenian assembly, you need to be a male citizen, born to Athenian parents, and over 18. That means women, foreigners called metics, slaves, and children. Almost 90% of the population are completely shut out. Democracy, but make it exclusive. If you do qualify, it's not just about voting every few years. You're expected to show up constantly, debate ideas, propose laws, and even serve on juries or run the treasury. No professional politicians, just a rotating cast of everyday men who might be fishermen one day and policymakers the next. You can even be picked for major offices by lottery, meaning your uncle, who's convinced Poseidon is hiding in his soup, might be overseeing military defense next week. And if someone gets a little too successful or starts trending in the wrong way, there's ostracism. Every year, citizens can vote to exile someone for a decade. No trial, no defense, just a broken piece of pottery with your name on it and a one-way ticket out of town. It's revolutionary, sure, but it's not exactly inclusive. Athens' so-called democracy is really a very exclusive club for sunburned men in sandals. Women? Silenced. Foreigners who pay taxes? Silenced. Slaves? Absolutely silenced, and often building monuments like the Parthenon while listening to political speeches they'll never have a say in. Even philosophers who ask too many awkward questions can find themselves on the wrong end of a hemlock cocktail. Let's get to the subject. People like to skip in their grand tales of Greek glory, slavery. In ancient Greece, slavery isn't just normal. It's expected. Even the humblest household probably has at least one slave, not because they're wealthy, but because owning another human being is seen as ordinary as owning a clay pot. The idea that no one owns anyone. That's considered outlandish, almost comedic. Slaves aren't a single ethnicity or background. They're from everywhere. Thracians, Scythians, Syrians, and even unlucky Greeks from rival city-states. Some are born into slavery. Some are war captives. Others kidnapped and sold at market. It's a thriving, brutal business, and there's always supply and demand. If you're a slave in Athens, you do everything. Cook, fetch water, clean, care for children, carry groceries, stand quietly during dinner. Some are educated, managing accounts or tutoring children, but don't get it twisted, they're still property. In the silver mines of Lorient, slaves, including children, crawl through tunnels barely wide enough for a sandwich, choking on dust and hoping to live through the week. Also, Athens can have shiny coins and grand temples. Some slaves are lucky enough to be tutors or scribes, but luck is a relative term here. They can be beaten, branded, sold, or killed without consequence. The rare few who earn their freedom, freedmen, are still stuck at the bottom. They can't vote, can't own land, and still owe lifelong loyalty to their former owners. Freedom is more of a technicality than an actual upgrade. And here's the real kicker. There's no abolitionist movement. No one's picketing the agora or writing scrolls about universal rights. Even philosophers like Aristotle, the guy who basically invented logic, will tell you that some people are slaves by nature. That's his big brain take. Ancient Greece gives us democracy, philosophy, and ethics. But all of it is built on a foundation of people who never got to write their own story, never got to speak in the assembly, and never got to matter. That's not a footnote. It's the whole base of the column. So, as you catch your breath and wipe the sweat from your sunburned brow, remember, the next time someone talks about the glory of ancient Greece, ask them whose glory they really mean. Because behind every marble statue and every epic poem is a world of daily struggle, silenced voices, and realities that never make it onto the souvenir postcards. And just when you think you've wrapped your head around the social order, daily routines, and the not-so-glamorous politics of ancient Greece, another challenge rolls in, one that doesn't care who you are or how many shields you own, staying healthy. Feeling unwell in ancient Greece? Well, get ready, because medicine, theatre, philosophy, and democracy are about to collide in some truly unpredictable ways. Imagine waking up in ancient Greece with a scratchy throat and the kind of headache that makes you long for modern pharmaceuticals. Too bad for you, because in this timeline, your HMO is basically a neighbor with a basket of questionable herbs and a temple full of snakes. You're not heading to a hospital. Those don't exist. So unless Hippocrates himself has moved in next door and is feeling generous, your medical plan is a wild combo of folk wisdom, desperate prayers, and a level of optimism not even Instagram wellness influencers could fake. Here's how it plays out. You're lying on a lumpy straw mattress, sweating through your peplos, while your aunt mutters about the four humours: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. The ancient Greeks were convinced that these bodily juices held the secret to every illness, from a stubbed toe to a full-on existential crisis. If you have a fever, someone mutters, obviously you've got too much blood, so get ready for a little impromptu bloodletting with tools that look like they were stolen from a blacksmith. Have a cough, too much phlegm. Expect a diet of fasting, possibly flavored with a side of garlic. Melancholy, lacks black bile. The universal cure: walk it off, stare dramatically at the sea, or, if you're really lucky, get a dose of crushed poppy seeds and hope for the best. Most Greek medicine is basically trial and error, with a heavy emphasis on garlic as the miracle ingredient. You might get a compress made from boiled figs and goat scrapings, or an herbal poultice that smells like a salad that's gone off. Did these treatments work? Occasionally. Did they hurt? Absolutely. Surgery is the nuclear option, reserved for when things have gone truly pear-shaped. There's no anesthesia, no antiseptic, and the surgical toolkit features iron knives, bone saws, and a prayer to whatever god you think is most likely to take pity on you. If you're unlucky enough to need something amputated, your comfort measure is a leather strap to gnaw on. Now, let's talk childbirth. Because if you're a woman in ancient Greece, giving birth is about as safe as wrestling a goat with a bad attitude. Midwives do their best, but the mortality rate for both mothers and infants is sky high. One badly positioned baby, one difficult labor, and it's game over. If you're wealthy, maybe you can summon a traveling physician with a scroll, some bizarre oils, and an attitude. If you're poor, you get whatever home remedies the neighborhood matriarchs can recall, plus the sheer force of your own stubbornness, rest, fresh air, and a balanced diet are the only universally accepted therapies. And frankly, they're the best you'll get. Still, the Greeks gave us the Hippocratic Oath, so there's that. They also gave us the enduring belief that boiled cabbage water is a medical marvel. So, your healthcare is a cocktail of herbs, hope, and hanging on, with garlic as your constant companion. Now, let's drag your sickly self to the theatre, because in ancient Greece, drama is compulsory. Theatre isn't just entertainment, it's civic duty, religious ritual, and a marathon of emotional endurance. Picture this, you squeezed shoulder to shoulder with thousands of fragrant citizens in an open-air amphitheatre carved right into a hillside. It's the Dionysia festival. And yes, you're expected to stay from dawn till dusk, watching tragedies, comedies, and satyr plays back to back. No intermissions, no snacks. Bathroom? That's what bushes are for. If you're late or disruptive, you're not just shamed, you can be fined. The performances themselves are a roller coaster. Tragedies serve up murder, madness, and divine retribution that spans generations. You're not there to laugh. You're there to sob in unison with your neighbors as ancient families implode, usually because someone ticked off a god 3 generations back. Then, just when you think you can't take any more, the comedies hit. But don't expect wholesome fun. These plays are savage. They lampoon politicians, philosophers, and entire cities with a level of bodily function humor that would make a modern stand-up blush. Imagine a mashup of Saturday Night Live and a college debate. But everyone is wearing masks with expressions the size of dinner plates and platform shoes that would give a drag queen vertigo. Every actor on stage is a man, regardless of the character, and the chorus belts out commentary, louder than a Twitter mob, but with more tunics. The audience isn't just watching. They're an active part of the chaos. They cheer, boo, throw things, and argue mid-scene. Theatre is democracy with a side of full-contact heckling. If you're offended, you make noise. If you're moved, you cry along or yell out your existential crisis for the whole crowd to hear. At the end of the festival, a jury hands out prizes to the playwrights. So after 3 days of emotional devastation, you might watch some bawdy farce where the dancing pig god take home the trophy. That's Greek theatre, a gauntlet of laughter, tears, and possibly a bruised ego. You stagger out of the amphitheatre, emotionally wrung out, and stumble straight into the agora, the marketplace, the beating heart of the city. Here, your senses are assaulted by the smells of olives and goats, and the sound of someone, always someone, asking, "But what is justice?" Welcome to the world of philosophy, where avoiding a debate is like dodging rain in a thunderstorm. In Athens, philosophy isn't a luxury. It's an inescapable street sport. If you're unlucky, you bump into Socrates, the original master of making strangers question their entire existence. He corners you while you're trying to buy olives. "Do you believe in truth?" he asks. You mutter, "Sure," but he's already spiraling you into a 3-hour existential crisis. Socrates never writes anything down. His student Plato records it all, so the world can remember your embarrassment for centuries. Socrates' real crime, though, is being so insufferably persistent that Athens eventually executes him. Officially, it's for corrupting the youth and disrespecting the gods. But let's be real. It's also because he can't stop grilling people in the marketplace. Philosophy here isn't a quiet, candle-lit affair. It's loud, confrontational, and weirdly competitive. Debates happen in the open, spontaneous, and intense, with enough ego to fill the Parthenon. You can't just watch from the sidelines. Philosophers drag in random bystanders all the time, and if you say something even slightly off, congratulations, you're today's cautionary tale about the unexamined life. Not even kids are safe. Aristotle tutors a young Alexander the Great, apparently giving him enough of an existential boost to go conquer half the planet. Imagine your high school civics teacher handing you a sword and a map and telling you to go fix the world. Philosophy gives you logic, ethics, and science, but also a pounding headache, a public identity crisis, and a 70% chance of being roasted by a sandal-clad intellectual. Say you're thriving in Athens now, clever, articulate, maybe a little too well-liked. That's where you've made your fatal mistake. In this democracy, popularity is a liability. Get too influential, too admired, and suddenly the entire city decides it's time to send you packing. The tool of choice? Ostracism. Once a year, all the citizens gather to debate whether someone, anyone, needs to be exiled for a decade. If enough people agree, everyone writes the name of their least favorite celebrity or neighbor on a piece of broken pottery. If you rack up 6,000 or more votes, you're out. No trial, no arguments, just a 10-year vacation you never wanted. You don't need to be a criminal, just someone who's gotten a little too big for your sandals. Maybe you're a war hero, a smooth talker, or just the owner of the city's best hair. Democracy has spoken. Pack your things and enjoy rural obscurity. Here's the kicker. Ostracism isn't even permanent. After 10 years, you can stroll back into Athens like nothing happened. Your property is untouched. Your citizenship is restored. And no one holds a grudge. It's the ancient world's version of being voted off the island, except you get to keep your olive oil. Some of the most famous Athenians got ostracized. Aristides the Just was so beloved that one guy voted against him just because he was sick of hearing how perfect he was. Or take Themistocles, who saved Athens from the Persians, only to be booted the minute he got a little too confident. Turns out, gratitude in Athens comes with an expiration date and a one-way ticket to social exile. Ostracism was supposed to protect the city from tyrants, but it mostly punished success. If you want to get ahead, you have to warp the finest of lines, respected but not too respected, popular but never threatening. It's like a reality show where winning too many fans gets you exiled to the countryside with nothing but your dignity and a stash of olive oil. Athens may have invented democracy, but it also created cancel culture about 2.5 millennia early. So, as you limp away from the agora with a headache from Socrates, garlic breath from your latest cure-all, and the ever-present risk of being voted out of the city, you might be wondering how anyone made it past age 30. Don't worry, next we'll dive into the real fun, death, gods, and the kind of legendary betrayals that even Netflix would call over the top. Step into the sun-bleached dust of ancient Greece, and your inner voice, the one that usually worries about Wi-Fi signals and forgetting your reusable coffee cup, suddenly has much bigger issues to obsess over. Here, you don't waste time daydreaming about a glorious old age. Instead, you're busy calculating the odds of making it to 35. Spoiler alert, the odds are not in your favor. Childhood is a gauntlet, where 1 in 3 never make it out, courtesy of a tag team of disease, malnutrition, and what can only be described as experimental's hygiene. If you think you've had a rough childhood, try surviving a world where a stubbed toe is a legitimate threat. Every scratch, every fever, every weird twinge in your stomach might be your last. You could check out from something as simple as dirty water, or, if you really want to win at ancient Greek roulette, childbirth, a leading cause of death for women. Picture yourself putting your fate in the hands of a midwife whose toolkit is mostly hope, hot water, and a prayer to a goddess who may or may not be in the mood to help that day. Medicine? Sure, if you count garlic compressors and the occasional philosophical debate about humors as healthcare. Divine intervention is on the table. Just don't expect consistency. You might get a miracle, or you might get, well, a spontaneous goat stampede. If you're lucky enough to live in a city, you get the full urban experience, crowded rooms, open sewers, and fountains that double as petri dishes. Epidemics? Routine. The plague of Athens didn't just knock on the door. It broke it down and set up camp, wiping out 1/3 of the population. Thucydides, who wrote about the whole mess, actually caught the plague himself, scribbled a few notes from his sickbed, and then somehow survived. Most people weren't so lucky. And then there's war, because, of course, the ancient world wouldn't be complete without the ever-present threat of being stabbed, speared, or trampled in battle. If you're a man, chances are you'll spend your days clutching a spear or rowing yourself into oblivion on a trireme. Even if you don't die in the mud, your injuries might. There are no antibiotics, no ER doctors, just a friend with a rag and a handful of garlic, hoping the gods are in a generous mood. And those gods? They are not your friends. They're the original drama queens, prone to flinging plagues, storms, or livestock in your general direction if you so much as forget to light a candle. One careless word about Zeus after 3 cups of wine, and you could end up as a cautionary tale. Forget to toss a coin in the right fountain, and you might get a visit from a vengeful river god. Miss a sacrifice, and your crops wither. Mock a temple statue, and lightning could be the last thing you see. Spiritual life isn't about comfort or hope. It's about damage control. The gods aren't warm, fuzzy deities eager to help you through hard times. They demand your loyalty, your wine, and your best goat. And if you get any of the rituals wrong, even by half a heartbeat, well, good luck. You have altars at home, rituals every morning, festivals every season, and civic ceremonies that leave you standing in the sun for hours, wondering if the gods even notice. Before you plant a single seed, you pray to Demeter. Before you march off to war, you try to appease Ares. If you're sailing, you pour out your best wine for Poseidon, and maybe chuck in a goat for good measure. Each god has their favorites and their grudges. Apollo might smile on your city, unless he's still mad about something your grandfather did. Hera, goddess of marriage, is basically the patron saint of marital misery, especially if Zeus has been making his rounds. Athena rewards the clever, but she'll turn you into a spider if you get too clever. And if you think the Olympians are enough to keep you up at night, just wait until you wander into the wrong grove and run afoul of a nymph, a satyr, or a woodland spirit whose idea of fun is cursing your left leg for eternity. The rules are opaque, the consequences are random, and you never really know if that streak of bad luck is because you skipped a prayer, insulted a minor deity in a dream, or just happened to be standing in the wrong place at the wrong time. Maybe your cousin did something. Maybe your great-grandfather angered someone centuries ago. Doesn't matter. The gods work in ways so mysterious, you'd need a full-time team of interpreters just to survive the week. But for all the terror, religion in Greece touches everything. Politics? Run by rituals. Births, marriages, funerals, all woven with myth and ceremony. The Olympic Games aren't just about showing off your muscles. They're a party for Zeus. The temple isn't just a landmark. It's the heart of the city. Myths explain why you fall in love, why it rains, why you stub your toe. You don't believe in the gods because it's comforting. You believe because not believing is too dangerous. It's not faith. It's a survival instinct, like flinching when you hear thunder and immediately apologizing to the nearest statue. So here you are, sweating through your tunic, gnawing questionable barley bread, and staring down the barrel of another day where war, plague, and divine mood swings are just facts of life. That fantasy of strolling among marble statues and debating with wise philosophers? Nice try. You, my friend, are not Socrates. You are the one hauling amphorae up a hill, dodging goats, and hoping you don't get exiled for complaining too loudly. Could you last a day in ancient Greece? Let's be honest. You'd probably fold before lunch. The heat, the diet, the constant threat of a random godly vendetta. Forget Instagrammable moments. You'd be too busy missing your running water, aspirin, and the luxury of venting your frustrations without risking exile. Even democracy is only for select male citizens. Medicine is little more than hope and garlic. Social media? Try a guy yelling about justice in the marketplace while brandishing a suspiciously old fish. Yet, for all the hardship, the Greeks endured. They built temples that still awe us, wrote plays we still perform, and asked questions we're still trying to answer. They sweated, bled, and mourned, but they also created. They wrestled with chaos, made beauty from pain, and turned every misfortune into a lesson or a myth. You probably wouldn't make it past your first sunstroke, goat bite, or impromptu philosophy lesson from an old man with suspiciously few teeth. But if you did, If you adapted, embraced the madness, and learned to dodge both literal and metaphorical lightning bolts, you'd find yourself among people who, despite it all, would hand you a tunic, point to the nearest amphora, and say, "Good, now carry that up the hill." And just as you're catching your breath, thinking maybe, just maybe, you could get used to this ancient chaos, you're swept away to another land, another time, where the stakes are just as high, but the enemies are flesh and blood, not immortal drama kings. It all begins with a death and a betrayal. Imagine yourself in eastern Britain, rolling hills under a steel-grey sky, the scent of wet earth heavy in the air. You're Prasutagus, king of the Iceni. You've danced the Roman dance for years, ruling as a client king, balancing autonomy and tribute, always with one eye on the horizon for a Roman patrol. You've built up wealth under fragile peace, thinking maybe, just maybe, you found a way for your family to survive the empire's shadow. But when your time comes, you try to play it safe. You leave a will, naming the Roman emperor as co-heir with your 2 daughters. It's a move meant to protect your legacy, to shield your loved ones from Rome's famous appetite for land and power. But Rome doesn't honor deals. Rome doesn't negotiate. Rome consumes. The ink on your will is barely dry before Roman officials arrive, not to mourn, but to seize. They take your lands, your treasures, your people's homes. But the real insult, the wound that starts to fester, is what they do next. The queen, Boudica, is dragged out and flogged in public, not to discipline her, but to humiliate, to show every watching eye that resistance is pointless, that dignity is a currency Rome won't accept. And then, in a move so monstrous, even your inner voice can't find a sarcastic quip, they violate her daughters before her. Not just a crime, but a message. You are nothing. Your gods, your laws, your family, they mean nothing here. This is not just a crackdown. This is psychological warfare. The kind that tries to erase a people's pride, to grind a queen into dust. But Boudica does not break. Where Rome expects silence, she gives them fury. Where they try to crush a minor tribal woman, they awaken a force, their wish they could put back to sleep. Rome thinks it has erased a problem. Instead, it has forged a weapon. Word of this atrocity spreads through Britannia faster than wildfire over dry moorland. Other tribes, battered and bled by Roman taxes, land seizures, and the grisly cost of occupation, listen. They remember their own humiliations, their own dead, their own sullen rage. Rome assumes the Britons are divided, scattered, leaderless, but in this moment they find unity in Boudica's pain. What started as a personal tragedy becomes a rallying cry. Rome has broken treaties, broken a family, and in doing so has shattered the illusion of its own invincibility. The spark is lit. The fire is coming. If the empire expects Boudica to disappear, they have no idea who they're dealing with. Boudica is not built for obedience. She is a queen, yes, but now she's something more. A mother with nothing left to lose. A woman whose rage could set the world alight. Roman historians, who usually reserve their praise for dead emperors and victorious generals, describe her as tall, fierce, hair like a curtain of fire streaming down her back, and a voice that slices through crowds like a blade. She is not just a figurehead, she is a symbol. And now she is a threat. But before she leads an army, she becomes something more dangerous still. She becomes the heart of a holy cause. Rome has tried to erase her dignity, her daughter's future, her people's hope. But Boudica refuses to be a victim. She knows exactly what Rome fears. Not a ragtag band of rebels, but united tribes. She sets out to forge that unity, one battered people at a time. The Trinovantes, once powerful, now living under the boot of Roman taxes and forced labor, are the first to answer her call. When Boudica speaks, she isn't a diplomat. She is a warrior mother. She speaks of ancestors, of gods, of land that no longer belongs to those who work it. Her pain is their pain, her rage, their rage. Other tribes begin to listen. The Corieltavi, the Cornoviae, even the ever-wary Brigantes. Her cause grows from vengeance to something like salvation, a crusade to reclaim Britannia's dignity from Roman arrogance. She makes no promises of safety. She offers only glory, and, if it comes to it, death with honor. But the tribes follow, because she does not hide behind her warriors. She rides among them, spear in hand, hair wild in the wind, eyes fixed on the horizon. She recites the names of the raped, the enslaved, the executed. She invokes the Celtic war goddess Andraste, promising her warriors that the gods themselves will take up their cause. She's no general in the Roman sense. She's never read a strategy scroll. She doesn't need to. She has the one thing Rome never counted on, righteous fury, sharpened by betrayal, guided by a mother's purpose. Even the land itself seems to rise to meet her. This isn't rebellion. This is resurrection. The queen Rome thought it had broken is now the tip of the spear, and the empire is about to learn that even the mightiest eagle can bleed. And this, my friend, is just the beginning. The fire is spreading, the drums of war are beating, and Boudica is about to unleash a storm that will shake Roman cities to their very foundations. Are you ready to witness what happens when one woman's pain becomes an entire nation's rage? Because, as the sun rises over Britannia, the Roman eagle, so long perched above the land, will soon find its wings scorched by rebellion. And that is where we go next. You know that old saying, Rome wasn't built in a day? Well, apparently, it could be burned down in less than a week, if you have enough rage, a queen in a chariot and a few thousand very angry neighbors. You're not the hero in some sanitized epic here. You're smack in the middle of Britannia, where the air tastes of smoke and revenge, and you can't decide if you're more shocked by the violence or by how fast everything is unraveling. The Roman eagle, once this smug symbol of order and civilization, is suddenly looking like a very nervous chicken, and the people making it nervous. That's you and everyone around you, feeding off the storm that Boudica conjured. Not a wild, pointless blaze, but a hurricane with a mission. You can feel the history textbooks trembling in the future. You remember how Boudica's movement started, not with some grand council in a marble hall, but in the damp shadows of sacred groves, a place where the trees saw more plotting than the Senate ever did. No one's wearing togas here. Everyone's in wool and mud, and if you look close, half the crowd still has the scars of Rome's generosity. Boudica doesn't sit. She stands in the dirt, her hair wild, her daughters beside her. And her voice is less speech and more battle cry. There's no Instagram filter for this kind of fury. The elders talk about lost sons, the mothers about stolen daughters, and the druids keep muttering about eagles falling from the sky. It's less a council, more a group therapy session with sharp objects. And you're swept up in it. Every tribe brings something. The Trinovantes arrive with their spears and a playlist of ancient war songs. The Iceni bring their war horses and enough face paint to make even a modern festival crowd jealous. The others file in with axes, blades, torches, and, most crucially, centuries of humiliation. Even the women grab whatever they can find: pitchforks, rocks, kitchen knives. It's not just an army, it's a mass resurrection of everything Rome thought it had crushed. If you're looking for a neat line of professional soldiers, you're out of luck. This is grief and anger, weaponized. But then again, Rome isn't exactly sending their best and brightest to Britannia. The legions are trained, sure, but they're stretched thin. A few centuries here and there, more used to tax collecting than actual war. Boudica knows that. She doesn't have discipline or armor, but she has numbers and a land that fights for her. And, honestly, she has something even better: hatred turned into momentum. That's not something you can buy with a denarius. The army grows. Farmers throw down their plows and grab swords. Hunters become assassins. And even ex-Roman slaves join, eager for payback. Everyone's carrying something heavier than a weapon: the memory of what Rome did, and the hope that things might finally change. You can almost feel it in your bones. This isn't about pay or glory. This is about never again seeing your children sold, your gods mocked, your freedom trampled. Boudica promises them something simple: victory or death. You're in, because what's left to lose? Now, let's talk targets. If you want to make a point, you go for the shiniest Roman city you can find. Enter Camuladunum. Once a proud tribal capital, now a Roman colony with all the trimmings, temples, statues, villas with heated floors, everything designed to remind you who's boss. The centerpiece is the Temple of Claudius, built on sacred ground, a marble insult staring you in the face. Boudica doesn't waste time. She gives the order, and the city doesn't so much fall as collapse. You're part of a tidal wave that sweeps over the streets, and suddenly the Latin commands are drowned out by war cries. The Romans, bless them, thought they were safe. The veterans lounging around, the officials busy writing up tax records, even the soldiers, most of whom are more used to shaking down locals than holding a line, are caught with their sandals down. They barricade themselves in the temple, convinced it will hold. Spoiler: it lasts about as long as a paper umbrella in a hurricane. In 2 days the doors are smashed, and the city is painted in a palette you don't see in any Roman mosaics. No one is spared. You see men, women, children, all swept up in a fury that's been simmering for generations. The statues come down, the villas burn, and the temple, so recently a symbol of Roman power, becomes a funeral pyre. The flames can be seen for miles. and the few survivors are left trying to piece together what just happened. And this isn't chaos for chaos' sake. Every torch thrown, every statue toppled, every Roman house set alight is a message. You took everything, now it's your turn. You catch glimpses of people who have lost everything reclaiming it in the only way Rome seems to understand. The stories of what happened here will travel faster than any imperial courier. And when they reach the governor, Suetonius, he's hundreds of miles away, busy dealing with another headache in Wales. By the time he hears, Camulodunum is just a memory, and the rebellion is already moving on. There's no time to celebrate. If you linger, Rome will regroup. Boudica knows this, so she pushes forward. Next stop, Londinium. If burning one city is a message, burning the biggest, richest city in the province is a declaration of war. Londinium is barely 17 years old, but already bustling. Merchants hawking goods from all corners of the empire, officials scurrying around with scrolls, and money flowing through the streets as easily as rain. But all that prosperity doesn't come with walls, and you can almost taste the fear as word reaches the city. Boudica is coming. Suetonius finally arrives, but he brings reality with him. He takes one look at the city, crowded, sprawling, utterly defenseless, and decides he's not about to get everyone killed for a lost cause. He gathers as many as he can and pulls out, leaving behind the unlucky, the stubborn, and anyone who thought a woman couldn't possibly threaten Roman power. You can see the disbelief on their faces as they realize the empire is abandoning them. Boudica's forces arrive like a summer storm. There are no gates to breach, no walls to climb. The army floods in, and you're swept along with it. The rage that fueled the first attack is now a wildfire, burning hotter and more indiscriminately. The killing isn't random, but it is total. Roman citizens are dragged from their homes, entire families erased, and the city itself is methodically destroyed. Some are impaled, some burned alive in their temples. No one is spared, and every Roman symbol is reduced to ash. Villas, warehouses, markets, all go up in smoke. The black column of fire is so massive, it seems to reach the gods themselves. You almost want to look away, but you can't. This isn't looting or occupation, it's erasure. The message is unmistakable. Rome, you are not invincible. The ancient historians, Tacitus, Cassius Dio, they'll later claim the death toll is in the tens of thousands. And you? You're walking through streets where the only sound is the crackle of burning timber and the cries of the defeated. The devastation even outstrips what happened at Camulodunum. To the Romans, this isn't just a rebellion. It's the end of the world. And through all of it, Boudica doesn't just issue orders from behind. She rides at the front, her daughters at her side, her hair streaming like a red banner. She watches the empire's pride crumble, and you're right there with her. This isn't senseless. This is retribution for her family, for every Briton whose life was shattered by Rome. And she isn't stopping. Next up, Verulamium, another Romanized hub, northwest of Londinium, fat with riches and just as unprotected. Verulamium doesn't know what's coming until it's too late. The city falls like the others, the pattern repeating. The army storms in. The inhabitants are cut down, and every sign of Roman civilization is reduced to rubble and ash. Temples are smashed, infrastructure is leveled, and the fire burns so hot it leaves a layer of destruction. Archaeologists are still digging up centuries later. If you're looking for mercy, you're in the wrong story. Here's where it gets interesting. Back in Rome, the Senate is in a panic. Reports of cities burned to the ground, Roman citizens slaughtered, and a queen, of all things, leading the charge. Nero himself is rumored to be on the verge of pulling out of Britannia entirely. Imagine that, the emperor who rules from the deserts of Africa to the snowy edges of Europe, shaken by a woman with a chariot and a cause. If cancel culture existed, Nero would be trending for all the wrong reasons. But Boudica's power isn't just in her army's numbers or the destruction they leave behind. It's in what she represents. Rome has always seen itself as the unmovable center of the world, its cities eternal, its rule foreordained. And then here you are, shoulder to shoulder with people once beaten and broken, now making the empire bleed. Every city you help burn isn't just a victory in war. It's a psychological earthquake. Boudica is rewriting the rules, reminding everyone that even the mightiest can fall. Still, every triumph comes with a cost. With each city reduced to ash, the rebellion grows, but so do the problems. Supply lines are stretched thin. Organization starts to falter. There's a dangerous confidence settling in, and some of the tribes start getting reckless, drunk on success and the myth they're building. Meanwhile, Rome is doing what Rome always does, regrouping. Suetonius might have retreated, but he hasn't surrendered. He's calling in reinforcements, drawing together the best of the legions, and choosing ground that favors discipline over raw fury. You can sense it in the air. This can't go on forever. The empire is wounded, but it's not dead. For every Roman who flees, another arrives, battle-hardened and ready. The Britain's parade of victories has become a heavy, unwieldy thing, a machine that's starting to sputter. Still, there's one persistent question, echoing through every campfire and whispered in every tent. Can Rome really stop her? Or has Boudica already won by proving that the empire's facade can crack, that queens can fight back, that history isn't just written by the victors? You look around at the smoke, the broken statues, the blackened ruins, and you realize you're standing in the middle of a turning point. This isn't a legend or a myth. This is as real as the ash in your lungs and the fear in the eyes of every survivor. The fire has spread, city after city, and now both sides are gathering for something bigger. The final showdown is coming, and the world is holding its breath, waiting to see which story will survive. And just as the flames of rebellion reach their peak, you can feel the momentum shifting. The fire had spread as far as it could. You're standing on a trampled field, your heart pounding in your ears, and for a fleeting moment you actually believe the impossible, that rage alone might break the world's most powerful empire. But now the winds have shifted. The rebellion that once roared through Roman towns has sputtered out, and you're left staring down a wall of polished shields and glinting steel. Welcome to the last stand of Boudica. Don't bother checking your notifications. No one's coming to save you, and there's no trending hashtag for what's about to go down. Let me set the scene. The Roman governor, Gaius Suetonius Paulinus, yes, his name sounds like something you'd accidentally type when autocorrect gives up, has picked his battleground like a chess master who's already seen the endgame. Suetonius isn't just another toga-wrapped bureaucrat. This guy has survived more ambushes than you've had bad dates. He knows the Britons are coming, and he knows exactly where to make his stand. He chooses a narrow defile, hemmed in by thick woods and rising hills, a place so tight you can practically hear the Britons' confidence deflating. Forget the wild open plains you imagine in epic movies. This is more like being funneled into the world's worst mosh pit. You look around at your fellow rebels, farmers clutching rusty axes, blacksmiths with soot still smeared on their arms, tribal chiefs with feathers and fury, mothers who once sang lullabies now gripping spears. There are thousands of you, maybe even hundreds of thousands, if you believe the legends. But here's the reality check. You're not an army. You're an angry crowd with a shared grudge and very little in the way of coordinated tactics. The Romans. There may be 10,000 strong, but each one has been trained, drilled, and hardened by years of conquest. They move like a machine, every shield fitting perfectly with the next, every sword strike measured and lethal. You feel the first prick of doubt. This isn't going to be a fair fight. Boudica rises high above the throng, standing proud atop her war chariot. Her daughters are beside her, their hair wild, their faces smudged with tears and defiance. She lifts her voice, and it cuts through the morning chill like a blade. She reminds you, reminds everyone, of the whippings and humiliations, the stolen lands, the burned villages, the daughters violated and the husbands slaughtered. Her words aren't just a rallying cry. They're an invocation, a summoning of every wound and every grudge. She calls upon the goddess Andraste, and you swear. For a second, you feel the ground tremble. She vows victory or death, nothing less. The crowd erupts. You raise your own weapon, swept up in the fever. You're certain the gods are listening. And then, like a tidal wave, the Britons charge. There's no subtlety, no formation, just a surge of bodies and anger. You're jammed shoulder to shoulder, almost tripping over the wagons that families brought along, expecting naively to witness a Roman massacre. But Suetonius isn't panicking. He stands behind his wall of shields, letting you and your comrades rush headlong into the funnel. Over and over, the Roman counterattack is pure, brutal choreography. Spears fly in unison, a cloud of death that rips through your ranks. Short, gladius swords dart and flash, slicing into the chaos. You see men fall, hear the crunch of bone and the screams of the wounded. You try to push forward, but the press of bodies behind you becomes a trap. There's nowhere to retreat. Families and wagons block the way. Panic bubbles up, spreading faster than any order or plan. You're being crushed from both sides, by the enemy and by your own people. The Romans advance, shields up, moving as one. Step by step, they push forward, methodical and merciless. The narrow space turns the field into a slaughterhouse. There's no room for heroics, only desperation and chaos. You see friends trampled, children screaming, the old and the helpless swept away in the stampede. The battle, if you can still call it that, is over before your mind can process the defeat. When the dust finally settles, the silence is deafening. Thousands, tens of thousands, lie dead. The air reeks of blood, sweat, and broken dreams. The rebellion shatters right there on the stained earth. Rome, battered but unbroken, stands victorious. You scan the ruins for Boudica, but she's vanished. No one knows where she's gone. Did she fall on her own sword, refusing to kneel before her enemies? Did she slip away into the forests, spirit broken but unbowed? The Roman accounts can't agree. Some claim she chose poison over the shame of capture. Others whisper that sickness claimed her in the aftermath. But here's the one fact they all share. Boudica was never paraded in chains through Rome. She simply disappears, a storm fading into the mist. No public execution, no final humiliation, just absence. And in that absence, something extraordinary happens. She becomes more than a mortal queen. She becomes legend. Even Suetonius, the grim-faced victor, can't erase her memory. Rome, humiliated by the scale of her revolt, desperately tries to bury the story. But it's far too late. Her name is already being whispered in tribal songs, carved into sacred groves, woven into the fabric of a people who refuse to let her go. To the Britons, Boudica isn't a defeated rebel. She's a martyr, a goddess of vengeance, the mother who stood against the mightiest force in the known world and made it bleed. Even the Romans, those chroniclers of conquest, can't help but show her a grudging respect. Tacitus, as Roman as they come, describes her not as a savage, but as a formidable leader, wronged by imperial arrogance. Cassius Dio, never one for understatement, writes of her as a towering presence, her speeches enough to send chills down a centurion's spine. She's terrifying, yes, but also admired. And that's the twist. Boudica doesn't fade away. She keeps coming back, century after century. In the Victorian era, she rises again in bronze, her chariot forever charging across the Thames near Westminster. Tennyson pens verses in her honor. School children memorize her name. She's invoked in suffragette speeches, her flame reignited in every fight against oppression. You see her in statues, in murals, in the unbroken spirit of a land that just won't kneel. Her chariot's spiked wheels tear through time itself, a vehicle of resistance for anyone who's ever felt crushed beneath the boot of empire. But don't get too sentimental. Boudica's legacy isn't all clean heroics. Her uprising was soaked in blood. Entire cities burned. Tens of thousands died at the hands of her warriors. Rebellion by nature is never tidy. History isn't a highlight reel of saints. It's a record of those who dared to resist, who picked up the pieces of their shattered worlds and fought back no matter the cost. And that is what keeps Boudica alive. Not just her war against Rome, but the fire she lit in the collective imagination. She lost everything and still stood tall. She refused to be defined by the empire that tried to break her. Grief became her sword. Modern historians still bicker over the details. Was she a vengeful queen, a visionary leader, a desperate mother? The footnotes pile up, but you know what? Ask any Briton and they won't quote sources. They'll tell you she was the queen who made Rome bleed, the one who united warring tribes, gave them a common cause, and taught the world that dignity can rise from devastation. She's not just a figure in dusty textbooks. She's a symbol, a living, breathing question for every ruler who forgets the power of the people. What happens when the silenced rise up? Boudica is the answer, and her spirit refuses to die. Even as Rome rebuilt its cities, redrew its maps, and pretended the rebellion never happened, her legend kept burning. In every battle against tyranny, in every voice that dares to say no, in every soul that would rather fall on their feet than live on their knees, Boudica endures. The ancient world loved its stories of gods and monsters, of heroes who defied fate, but none hit closer to home than the tale of a woman who lost everything and dared to fight back. Centuries later, as you wander the streets of London, you might pass her statue near Westminster Bridge. Tourists snap photos, traffic drones past, and most have no idea. They walk in the shadow of a rebellion that once shook an empire. But her legacy was never just about bronze and stone. It's about what she stands for. Boudica became a question that echoes through history. What if you lose everything and still refuse to kneel? She's not perfect. Her hands are stained with blood, her story tangled with tragedy. But that's exactly why she endures. She's a reminder that resistance, real resistance, is messy. It's fierce and flawed and utterly human. And sometimes it's the only thing that matters. So, as the legend of Boudica rides on the wind, let's take a step back from the battlefield and look at how the ancients understood the very nature of suffering, sickness, and healing. Because to them, illness wasn't just bad luck or a roll of the microbial dice. It was a sign that something was out of balance, something sacred had been disturbed. Forget about bacteria and viruses for a moment. In the ancient world, if you were sick, the first question wasn't, "What's wrong with your body?" but "Who did you anger? What taboo did you break?" In the shadowy temples of Mesopotamia, a fever meant the gods were displeased. Priests and healers would gather, not around your bedside with medicine, but with omens, incantations, and rituals. Diagnosis started with a confession, not a thermometer. Did you offend a deity, cross a forbidden line, attract a jealous spirit? Healing meant more than herbs and ointments. It called for ritual purification, sacrifices, sometimes a full-on spiritual exorcism. The ancient version of "Have you tried turning it off and on again?" was, "Have you tried apologizing to the god you insulted?" Jump a continent east, and you're in ancient China, where medicine is all about balance, yin and yang, the 5 elements, the subtle dance of hot and cold, dry and moist, anger and calm. You didn't just treat a cough here. You interrogated the time of day. It worsened, the emotions that triggered it, the patterns in the body's tides. The healer's job wasn't just to prescribe roots and needles, but to sense the harmony or disharmony of the whole human cosmos. Herbs, acupuncture, changes in diet, and meditative rituals were all woven together in a holistic attempt to restore equilibrium. The body was a microcosm of the universe. If you were out of sync, so was everything else. Swing back to Greece, and you land in the world of Hippocrates, the so-called father of medicine. He's famous for kicking the gods out of the sick room, but don't kid yourself. Even he believed that health was all about balance. The Greeks loved their humours: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile, and each one supposedly shaped not just your health, but your personality. Too much black bile. Congratulations, you're melancholic. Too much blood? Get ready for a life of reckless optimism. Western medicine would be stuck on these humours for centuries, with leeches and vomit bowls to prove it. But here's the through line. Across Mesopotamia, China, Greece, India, and beyond, health to the ancients meant wholeness, not just the absence of pain, but the presence of harmony. Your body wasn't an isolated machine. It was a living thread in a vast web, connected to the earth, the stars, the spirits, and the gods. In India, the concept of doshas governed your body and mind. In Africa, healers saw spirits at work in every fever and ache. Nature, when disturbed, always pushed back. If you wanted to heal, you couldn't just set a bone or crush a fever. You had to restore the invisible balance, make peace with the world. And let's not forget Egypt, the land where pyramids loom, and medicine is both science and sorcery. Egyptian healers, honored as Swinyu, weren't just doctors. They were sacred mediators, standing at the crossroads of flesh and the divine. Their remedies were advanced, setting bones, draining abscesses, even performing surgery with copper tools sterilized in fire. They observed pulses, examined urine, and catalogued symptoms with a precision that would impress any modern doctor. But every cure began with a prayer. Every herb was blessed, every wound wrapped with a spell. The gods had to be pleased, the soul had to be purified, cosmic order had to be restored. The Egyptian medical papyri, like the legendary Ebers papyrus, are packed with recipes and spells for everything from toothaches to tumors. Honey was their go-to antiseptic, smeared on wounds with a faith that turned out to be surprisingly justified. Garlic and onions kept hearts healthy. Castor oil kept the bowels moving, and even moldy bread found its way onto infected sores. An accidental antibiotic that would make Fleming jealous. Egyptian doctors were specialists long before the word existed. Some focused on the eyes, some on the stomach, others on the mysterious ailments of the soul. They healed not just pharaohs and priests, but everyday people, and their fame spread across borders. But in every case, the physical and the sacred were never separated. A fever might have come from a mosquito, or from an angry ghost. Healing meant stitching together the torn fabric of the universe itself. So next time you pop a painkiller or schedule a checkup, remember, to the ancients, medicine was a sacred act, a cosmic negotiation, a battle not just for the body, but for balance in all things. The healer's touch was part science, part magic, always a little bit of both. And in that ancient worldview, the roots of medicine run deep, intertwined with myth, ritual, and a stubborn belief that even in the face of suffering, harmony could still be restored. And that, my friend, brings us to the next chapter of this journey through ancient healing. While Greece and Egypt were mixing potions and praying to the gods, India was already crafting its own story of medicine and balance, long before modern medicine ever emerged. Let's take a deep breath. No, not that shallow modern one. I mean a full, stomach-expanding inhale, like you just woke up somewhere between the Indus River and a mango grove, thousands of years before anyone ever heard the word antibiotics. Because here, in ancient India, you're expected to understand the body as more than just a malfunctioning meat vessel. You're not a broken-down car in need of a mechanic. You're an echo of the entire cosmos, a tiny universe with your own swirling elements and mysterious energies. And your inner voice, which has apparently been yanked into this scene with all your 21st century skepticism intact, is about to get a crash course in Ayurveda. That's Sanskrit for the science of life. But don't expect a semester of Bio 101. Instead, you're handed a philosophy, a whole lifestyle, tied to the rhythm of monsoon rains and the slow, endless turn of the seasons. It's a system where your mood swings, digestive issues, and tendency to binge on honey cakes are all written in the stars, or, more precisely, in your doshas. Dosha. Say it out loud, let it roll off your tongue. There are 3 of them: Vata, Pitta, and Kapha. And no, you can't swap them out like yoga instructors or pick whichever sounds trendiest on a wellness podcast. Each dosha is a recipe, a mix of earth, water, fire, air, and ether. Vata is all about movement, the wind in your thoughts and the gurgle in your intestines. Pitta is transformation, the fire that digests your dinner, and, when out of balance, might just burn you with rage. Kapha is structure and stability, the mud holding your bones together. From the moment you're born, let's be real, probably into a noisy, incense-filled courtyard, you inherit a unique blend of these cosmic elements. When things go sideways, Ayurveda blames it on a doshic disaster, too much of one, not enough of the other, all thrown off by bad food, stress, or the fact that your neighbor's goat refuses to shut up. Now, if you're imagining a bunch of old men in saffron robes, chanting and waving herbs like they're auditioning for a TikTok trend, you're only half right. Ayurveda is ancient, but it's also shockingly methodical. Texts like the Charaka Samhita and Sushruta Samhita, written more than 2 millennia ago, read like medical encyclopedias. Charaka was your go-to for internal medicine, preaching prevention before cure. He believed the best way to fend off disease was to eat well, sleep on time, and keep your emotions in check. Healers weren't just pill pushers. They were therapists, nutritionists, even philosophers. Sushruta, on the other hand, was the action hero of ancient surgery. Picture him hunched over a patient, wielding metal and wooden tools, over 100 tools of the, describing more than 300 surgical procedures before the Greeks even figured out which side of the body the liver was on. And then there's the rhinoplasty. Yup, nose jobs, but don't go picturing a fancy spa. and a recovery room with cucumber slices on your eyes. Sushruta was reconstructing noses lost to punishment or accident, using ingenious skin flaps from the cheek or forehead. No anesthesia, no Instagram filters, just grit. This wasn't about vanity. It was about restoring dignity after mutilation, a kind of ancient restorative justice. Sushruta's techniques were so advanced that, centuries later, European doctors would look back and realize they were still playing catch-up. But Ayurveda isn't just about scalpels and herbal teas. Its power comes from seeing you as a whole, your body, your mind, your spirit, and, yes, your tendency to overthink everything. Treatments weren't limited to swallowing roots. You might find yourself sweating through a yoga session, practicing pranayama, those deep, controlled breaths you wish you could master now, or getting slathered in oils for an abhyanga massage. Fasting wasn't a crash diet. It was a meditative ritual for recalibrating your inner fire, your Agni. Every plant was medicine: turmeric to cleanse, ashwagandha to soothe, neem and tulsi to purify. Healing was never just about killing germs. It was about realignment, about returning to your place within nature's delicate machinery. Ayurveda whispers, you are not above nature. You are nature. So when illness strikes, it's nature nudging you to restore balance, not some random cosmic punishment. But let's not linger in the lotus fields forever. Fast forward eastward to ancient China, where medicine isn't just about what you can see, poke, or prod. Here you're a vessel for qi, pronounced chi. And no, not the trendy grain. Qi is the invisible life force crackling through every living thing, the current you never notice until it's blocked. If you want to be healthy, you need your qi flowing free, not stuck like traffic in Shanghai before a holiday. In this world, doctors are less like white-coated scientists and more like weather forecasters crossed with philosophers. They watch the cycles of the moon, the migration of cranes, the shifting of seasons, and see the same patterns mirrored inside you. Two cosmic forces rule the show, yin and yang. Yin is cool, dark, passive, inward. Yang is hot, bright, active, outward. Every organ, every emotion, every single bodily hiccup gets classified under this eternal tug-of-war. Too much yang, fever and wild dreams. Too much yin, fatigue that makes you want to crawl back into your sleeping mat and never move again. Diagnosis is an art form. You're sitting in front of a physician, and they're not reaching for blood tests or MRI scans. Instead, they're scrutinizing your tongue, feeling your pulse in 3 different places, listening to the way your voice quivers when you complain about your mother-in-law. Dreams, bowel movements, even how you handle heartbreak, all of it offers clues about your qi. And when things are off, the toolkit is as wide-ranging as a modern wellness retreat, but with fewer Instagrammable smoothies. Acupuncture is first on the menu, slender needles slipped into precise points along invisible meridians. You may flinch, but this is about releasing blockages, letting the energy river run wild again. Moxibustion comes next, where burning mugwort near your skin warms the flow, stirs the blood, and, if nothing else, makes you smell like a smoky campfire. Cupping, with those glass domes leaving circular bruises, is supposed to suck out the staleness, the stuck bits of body and soul. And then come the herbs, the Tai Chi exercises, the careful dietary tweaks that make your current meal plan look laughably uninspired. The Yellow Emperor's Inner Canon. Imagine it as the ancient Chinese version of WebMD, but written in poetic riddles, lays down the laws. It doesn't just list illnesses and symptoms. It weaves together causes, emotional triggers, environmental shifts, and the importance of a good night's sleep. It insists that anger, grief, or fear can throw your organs into chaos. Healing isn't just about what you swallow. It's about how you feel, how you dream, and how you relate to the world around you. You're not a sealed-off specimen in a lab. You're a weather system, a garden, a mood ring for the universe. The healer's real job is to listen, to tune in to the heartbeat of your ki and coax it back into song. Now, let's pivot west. Imagine the scene changing from silk robes and incense to olive groves and marble columns. You're in the world of ancient Greece and Rome, where medicine starts to shake off the god's grip and dress itself in the early robes of reason. But don't get too comfortable, because here, the body is still a delicate balancing act, one wrong move away from disaster. At the heart of this worldview is humorism. Not the stand-up comedy kind, but the theory of the four humors, courtesy of Hippocrates, the OG of Western medicine, and later polished by Roman doctors like Galen. Picture this. Your body is a stew of full vital fluids: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Each one matches up with an element: air, water, fire, and earth. And, because the ancients never missed a chance to make it personal, each humor also dictates your temperament. If you're perpetually chipper and energetic, thank your abundance of blood. If you're prone to sulking and existential dread, blame your excess of black bile. Illness? That's just a bad batch, an imbalance in your internal stew. Too much yellow bile, and you're feverish and snappy. Too much phlegm, and you might as well move into a cave and nap for a month. Doctors of this era didn't just hand out herbs and hope for the best. They prescribed bloodletting, purging, specialized diets, and baths that were equal parts remedy and ordeal. But here's where your inner voice, firmly stuck in the present, starts to see glimmers of modernity. Hippocrates insisted on careful observation, watching the patient, considering the climate, the water, even the patient's mood swings after a bad date. The legendary Hippocratic Oath, still echoed in medical schools today, urged do no harm. In practice, this meant treating the whole person, not just the most dramatic symptom. Greek healing sanctuaries, known as Asclepiae, after the god Asclepius, were equal parts hospital and spiritual retreat. Patients didn't just get bandages. They slept in sacred dormitories, hoping for divine dreams. Ritual purification, exercise, diet, prayer. It was a holistic spa day, ancient style. Think less sterile clinic, more mind-body-soul reboot, with a side of incense and philosophical debate. Here, reason and ritual walked hand in hand. You might pray for a cure in the morning, then discuss the latest theory of bile at lunch. Then the Romans stepped in. Galen, the celebrity physician who patched up gladiators and counseled emperors, took Greek theories and supercharged them. He dissected animals to map anatomy, wrote so many medical texts you'd need a team of scribes just to copy them, and turned humorism into the empire's official operating system. Sure, some of his ideas missed the mark. If you're squeamish, don't read about his experiments. But his influence stuck around for centuries. Medicine was moving toward a new idea. The body as a system, complex but knowable. Not just a plaything of the gods, but a puzzle to be solved with careful study, reason, and maybe a little luck. But here's the kicker. Long before any of these grand texts, before anyone thought to write down a recipe for willow bark tea or diagram a spleen, there were healers scattered across every continent, working with what the earth gave them. In these indigenous worlds, whether you're standing by a Cherokee fire, a Lakota camp, an Amazonian riverbank, or under the wide hot sky of Australia, medicine isn't a job. It's the rhythm of life itself. Healers are medicine, men and women, shamans, guides, counselors, and memory keepers, all rolled into one. Illness here isn't just a broken bone or a fever. It's a rupture in the web of relationships that binds you to nature, to your ancestors, to your own spirit. Healing is less about fixing and more about reconnecting. Every plant has a purpose: sage to purify, cedar to protect, sweetgrass and tobacco for rituals that cleanse body and soul. The knowledge isn't written down in textbooks. It lives in songs, dances, and the collective memory of the people. Sweat lodges, vision quests, drumming circles. These are the operating theatres. Sometimes illness is blamed on a broken taboo, a wandering spirit or soul loss, a trauma so severe that part of you flees. The cure? Rituals to call the lost soul home, with chanting, dancing, guided trance. The goal isn't just survival. It's restoration, a return to wholeness. Across the Amazon, shamans brew ayahuasca, a mind-bending concoction that's less about trippy visions and more about deep healing insight. Plants are teachers, revealing hidden causes of suffering. In Aboriginal Australia, bush medicine blends herbs, clays, and rituals reaching back to the Dreamtime, an ancient era when ancestors shaped the land and the rules of living. Here, healing is about honoring land, lineage, and songlines, the invisible highways connecting people, places, and stories. Modern medicine may have its gadgets and white coats, but for these indigenous healers, the earth was always the first pharmacy. Healing isn't about waging war on disease. It's about remembering who you are, where you came from, and how you fit into the grand story. You realize, maybe a little grudgingly, that for all our progress, the ancient world knew a few things about the art of living and surviving that we're still scrambling to rediscover. Of course, all these systems, as different as they seem, are tangled together by one stubborn thread, the belief that health is balance and healing is an act of restoration. And if you think you're ready to jump into the next chapter, brace yourself, because as we move forward, medicine gets messier, rituals get stranger, and the stories, especially those from the island of Lesbos and the life of Sappho, remind you that art and healing sometimes spring from the same wound. Across every ancient civilization, regardless of language, geography, or belief system, there was one constant. Picture yourself, for a moment, back in the ancient world. No Wi-Fi, no urgent Slack messages. Just a body, a soul, and a vast, unpredictable universe. When your body started betraying you, fever, pain, the creeping suspicion you'd angered something unseen, the answer wasn't just a doctor with a bag of herbs or a scalpel. It was ritual. It was spirit. Healing wasn't just about mashing up roots and hoping for the best. It was about aligning yourself with the cosmos, negotiating with the invisible, and sometimes dancing, chanting, or weeping your way back to wholeness. You realize, as you look around, that every ancient civilization you could possibly land in, Babylonia, Egypt, Greece, somewhere deep in the African continent, had their own flavor of this belief. Sickness was rarely just a fluke of biology. It was a sign. Maybe you ticked off a god. Maybe a ghost was sulking in your attic. Or maybe your soul was a little out of tune with the music of the universe. Either way, you weren't just fighting infection. You were in a cosmic negotiation. Let's say you're in ancient Mesopotamia. The air thick with incense and anxiety. The local exorcist priest is muttering incantations while pressing a poultice to your aching head. He's buried a tiny clay figurine under your bedroom floor, a kind of ancient spiritual firewall to ward off whatever invisible jerk is making you sick. The family crowds around, eyes wide, as the priest recites spells in a sing-song whisper. Here, ritual isn't some superstitious add-on to medicine. It's the centerpiece. You don't heal without it. You can almost feel the weight of belief in the room, heavier than the scent of myrrh. Wander over to Egypt, and you're in a world where the gods are everywhere, especially in the sick room. Before a healer so much as unwraps a bandage or dabs some honey on your wound, you get a prayer. Maybe several. To Thoth, the god of wisdom, or Sekhmet, who's both healer and destroyer, depending on her mood. You're not just a patient. You're a battlefield for cosmic forces. Illness is a kind of imbalance, a blip in Ma'at, the sacred order that keeps everything, from the Nile to the stars, running smoothly. The healer's job, to patch you up physically and spiritually, to bring you back into that delicate, divine balance. Forget the sterile isolation of a modern clinic. Here, everyone's in on the act. Even your pain has a cosmic subplot. You jump continents, and now you're in a village somewhere in Africa, the night alive with drumming and the stamp of feet on earth. The local healer, may be called a Sangoma or a Nanga, doesn't just hand you a potion. They're channeling ancestors, reading bones and sometimes entering trance states to diagnose whatever's gone wrong. The herbs matter, sure, but it's the ritual that brings meaning. The ritual that tells you your suffering is seen and understood. You're not just a malfunctioning machine. You're a soul that's wandered off the path, and the community is here to sing you home. Fast forward to classical Greece, and you're lying in a temple of Asclepius, the god of healing, hoping that tonight's dreams will reveal a cure. You've fasted, bathed, maybe even sacrificed something small and furry. Now you sleep beneath a statue, hoping for divine inspiration. In the morning, priests interpret your dreams and prescribe a treatment. There's a strange comfort in the ritual. Your illness is part of a story, a structure. You're not flailing in chaos. You're walking a path. Others have walked before you. Sure, From your modern vantage point, a lot of this sounds like superstition. But pause a second. Doesn't ritual still matter? Even now, doctors in white coats talk about the placebo effect, the mysterious power of belief to spark real healing. The ancients didn't need double-blind studies. They understood something we're only now rediscovering, that healing is as much about meaning and connection as it is about medication. Sometimes a whispered word, a touch, or the conviction that you're not alone can heal wounds deeper than any scalpel could reach. Speaking of scalpels, let's talk about ancient surgery. If you've pictured trembling hands, bone saws made of flint, and patients screaming into the void, you're only half right. Yes, anesthesia was basically bite on this stick and pray. But don't let Hollywood fool you. The ancient world was shockingly skilled with a blade. These weren't butchers. They were the original artists of the body, mixing courage, precision, and a dash of desperation. Travel to India, and you'll find Sushruta, the surgical superstar whose name should be as famous as any Marvel hero. Over 2,000 years ago, he wrote the Sushruta Samhita, a medical epic detailing more than 300 surgical procedures. Tumor removals, hernia repairs, setting bones. He even describes reconstructing noses, a kind of protoplastic surgery with tools as sharp and diverse as anything in your local hospital drawer, forceps, scalpels, and needles, all carefully categorized. Sushruta, ever the safety nerd, insisted on cleanliness, surgical prep, and anatomical knowledge. Sure, he mostly dissected animals, but his insights changed the world. His surgical gospel spread to the Islamic Golden Age and eventually seeped into Western medicine. The next time your surgeon washes their hands or double-checks their instruments, thank Sushruta's ghost. Head back to Egypt and you'll find a toolkit right out of an Indiana Jones movie. Bronze knives, bone saws, cauterizing rods, and papyrus scrolls detailing how to stitch up wounds, set broken limbs, and drain abscesses. Egyptian healers even practiced trepanation, cutting a hole in the skull to treat head injuries. Think that sounds like a death sentence? Archaeologists have unearthed skulls with neat, healed circles, proof that many patients survived their cranial adventures. The Egyptians weren't alone. In ancient Peru, hundreds of trepanned skulls have been found, often from warriors, and in some regions, the survival rate soared past 80%. Imagine that, a hole in your head, and you still make it to dinner. These healers used what they had: coca leaves, maize beer, herbal antiseptics. You might envy their pain tolerance, but you can't dismiss their skill. Now, picture the Greco-Roman world, where Galen, the OG of anatomy, is dissecting animals and patching up gladiators. His notes on nerves and blood vessels laid the groundwork for centuries. Roman military surgeons, meanwhile, became battlefield legends. Armed with clamps, ligatures, and a no-nonsense attitude, they treated wounds with ruthless efficiency. If you're picturing a surgeon as a butcher, think again. These people were respected, even revered, brave enough to cut into living flesh, hoping to carve health from pain. Their knowledge was incomplete, sure, but their legacy lingers every time a modern scalpel glints under the operating room lights. Now, snap back to your own century. We've got AI diagnostics, robotic surgery, and genetic tests that can predict your risk for everything from heart disease to whether cilantro tastes like soap. But listen closely, and you'll hear the ancient world whispering in the background. Yoga studios teach Ayurveda. Pharmacies stock Chinese herbs. Some hospitals even offer smudging ceremonies to honor indigenous healing traditions. And med students still recite a version of the Hippocratic Oath, a relic of Greco-Roman ethics, before they're unleashed on the world. Our surgical tools might be titanium now, but their ancestors were forged in the fires of Sushruta's imagination. And those ancient ideas about holistic care, prevention, and the mind-body connection, they're back in vogue, dressed up as integrative health and wellness. Science is finally catching up to the old intuition that stress, loneliness, and grief can wreck your immune system, ruin your sleep, and manifest as physical pain. Meditation, once the domain of monks and mystics, is now prescribed for anxiety and studied for its effect on brainwaves. Forest bathing, yes, literally walking in the woods and soaking up tree vibes, has become a prescription for burnout. Meanwhile, the placebo effect, that mysterious healing powered by belief alone, still baffles the experts. It's tempting to dismiss ancient medicine as primitive, just folklore, guesswork, dressed up in ritual robes. But if you look closer, you see something more profound. A worldview that treats illness not as a busted part in a machine, but as a signal that something deeper is out of sync. That healing isn't just about fixing what's broken, but about restoring meaning, comfort, and connection. The ancients got this on a gut level. Whether they used chants, scalpels, herbs, or a prayer to the moon, they understood that healing was sacred. And maybe, as we stride into the future with our genome editors and microchips, we're not leaving the ancient world behind at all. Maybe we're finally coming back to it, armed with new tools, but the same longing for balance, for wholeness, for healing that goes beyond the body and reaches the soul. And now, as you're adjusting to the idea that a ritual could matter as much as a remedy, let's turn to someone whose words were their own kind of medicine, a woman whose very voice was a revolution. Her name floats through history, half hidden, half remembered, but impossible to forget. Sappho, not a conqueror, not a queen, but a poet whose gift was turning the rawest moments of being human into verses that still sting with honesty today. And to understand her, you have to understand the island that shaped her, Lesbos, a place as lush and complex as any myth, ready to meet the woman who made lyric poetry a mirror for the soul. In an age when the great epics of Homer praised gods and heroes and men, filled scrolls with battles and conquests, Sappho wrote about the heart. Picture this. You find yourself on the sun-baked hillsides of ancient Lesbos, where the air is thick with the scent of olives and salt, and the world still believes that war, bronze, glory, and the gods are all there is to write about. But not you, not today. You, or rather Sappho, have something else entirely on your mind. The electric jolt of a fleeting glance, the flutter in your stomach when laughter spills from someone's lips, the ache of desire that refuses to be tamed by convention or myth. In a world obsessed with epic tales and the kind of heroics that end with blood on the sand, you are quietly scribbling about the tremble in your own hand. And here's the twist. Unlike everyone else, you write in the voice of I. Not some distant narrator, not a detached chronicler, but yourself, raw and undisguised. You're not just recounting events, you're living them on the page, letting every quiver of longing and every pang of jealousy ripple through your words. It's almost scandalous, honestly, because what you're feeling, love, tenderness, yearning, and that bittersweet stab of jealousy, was supposed to stay locked up behind closed doors, especially if you were a woman. Step into Sappho's sandals for a moment. In ancient Greece, a woman's voice is supposed to be an echo in the home, barely heard beyond the walls. Men own the agora, the scrolls, the debates, and the spotlight. But you, with your stubborn streak and a gift for melody, carve out a space where your voice isn't just heard. It's unforgettable. You don't stage a revolution with banners or speeches. Instead, you do it with rhythm, with verses that weave their own secret world. Nobody can bar you from this universe because you built it from the inside out. A place where emotion isn't weakness, but the very heart of strength. And you don't hide behind metaphors or faceless muses. You dare to name names. You remember the way Anactoria's laughter spilled like water, the perfume that clung to Atthis after she ran through the garden, the careful braids in a friend's hair before a festival. These aren't just poetic devices. They're people, living and breathing, loved and missed. It's as if you're writing an ancient group chat. Only instead of emojis, you have the sapphic stanza and a lyre. There's one fragment that always gets you. You're sitting off to the side, watching the woman you adore speak to a man. He's laughing, listening, basking in her attention. And suddenly, you, the all-knowing narrator, the modern soul trapped in an ancient body, feel the sting of jealousy. But you don't rage or plot. You just observe, quietly, every heartbeat echoing with that universal ache, unrequited love. The feeling is so sharp, so immediate, that it bridges centuries. Anyone who's ever watched their crush flirt with someone else can recognize the pulse of pain in your voice. It's not melodramatic, it's devastatingly real. Your poetry dips into the sensual, but never wallows in crudity. You write about intimacy, the way a painter traces the curve of a lover's neck in soft light, or the hush of sleep settling over warm skin. Beauty and intimacy are inseparable in your lines. One flows into the other without apology. It's no wonder that later centuries got nervous. Some tried to erase the way you loved women, as if their discomfort could scrub away the evidence. Others turned your heartbreak into a cautionary tale, a myth, an object lesson for the next generation. But no amount of censorship or mythologizing can dull the edge of your honesty. Let's be real. What you did was radical. You wrote as someone who had loved and been loved, who had lost and longed, and you did it openly, lyrically, and with zero apologies. You didn't just jot down poems. You composed music for the soul. And in ancient Greece, poetry was a living thing. It wasn't meant to sit on dusty shelves or scrolls. It was meant to be sung, to pulse in the air, to vibrate through the bodies of everyone listening. Your specialty was the lyric, a form designed for performance, short and poignant. A confession strummed on the lyre and carried on the breeze. Imagine this. You're seated among friends, or maybe your students, the glow of oil lamps flickering across their faces. You cradle your lyre in your lap, fingers poised to pluck out the first gentle notes. The room quiets. The air thrums with anticipation. Each poem begins not with a grand declaration, but with a question, an invocation, a plea whispered to Aphrodite, or tossed like a pebble into the sea of conversation. Come to me now, golden-throned goddess. Free me from this heartache. These aren't just lines, they're invitations into your world. And the sound of your poetry, can you hear it? The softness of Aeolic Creek, the subtle rhythm of the sapphic stanza, 3 long lines followed by a quick, breathless ending. It's the rise and fall of your own longing, caught in the meter, a sigh at the end of every thought. The lyric is intimate, immediate. The original DM slid across centuries. You sing in a dialect that's half lullaby, half incantation, each word chosen for its music as much as its meaning. Your gatherings might look like rituals or lessons, but really, they're spaces of freedom, safe zones where women can learn, feel, and express without fear. Here, emotion, music, and body are stitched together, not torn apart. You don't just teach poetry. You create a culture. You train others to feel as deeply and write as honestly as you do. And in that, you build a legacy that stretches beyond the walls of your island. If you close your eyes, you might just hear it, the twang of strings, your voice rising clear and brave, the hush as every listener leans in. The poems don't just begin, they unfold, as if you're starting a conversation or sending up a prayer. Even now, their modern pulse is undeniable. You could set them to music today, maybe something lo-fi or a stripped-down ballad, and they'd still hit home. Every verse you write is a reminder. Emotion is music. Heartache and desire deserve a melody, not just a passing mention in some dusty scroll. And your songs, they keep echoing across the centuries, refusing to be silenced or sanitized. Sappho didn't just write poetry. She gave voice to everything the world tried to hush, and in doing so, she made sure her truth would outlast the myths. But here's the real heartbreak. For every line of Sappho's poetry we have today, dozens, maybe hundreds, have vanished into the void. Her voice lingers, but only in fragments. And that's where we're heading next, into the story of loss, legacy, and the strange immortality of Sappho's voice. Let's be honest, Sappho's poetry is basically the definition of lost and found. You're left standing in this historical sandstorm, sifting through the fragments that survived. Imagine yourself now, hunched over ancient papyrus scraps, squinting at Greek letters that look like someone spilled alphabet soup on a sun-bleached doormat. Some pieces are nearly whole, others are just ghostly traces, a single aching word, the shadow of an unfinished thought. And yet, even these scraps, these half-whispers, glow with an energy that refuses to die. It's like holding onto a cooled ember and feeling the heat of a long-dead fire. Why did so much vanish? You already know the answer, don't you? Time is a glutton, always hungry for stories. War stomps through libraries with muddy boots, and then there's deliberate destruction, history's version of a toxic ex, determined to erase you from the group chat. Sappho's works once filled 9 whole books, shelved in the legendary Library of Alexandria, that grand doomed temple of knowledge that's been the subject of every intellectual's fever dream. You can almost picture it. Scrolls stacked higher than your apartment ceiling, scholars arguing about meter and rhyme instead of rent and Wi-Fi. Those 9 volumes were copied, sung, and cherished across the ancient world. But Alexandria fell, and with it went more than just Sappho. The flames devoured Homeric epics, lost comedies, treatises on medicine, and, yes, poetry that had the power to make gods weep. And then came the slow grind of cultural change. When Christianity swept through the Mediterranean, anything pagan or immoral suddenly became a liability. Sappho's poetry, so unapologetically passionate, so honest about desire between women, wasn't just neglected. It was targeted, censored, sometimes outright burned. By the medieval period, Sappho herself was a rumor. Her name survived, but her words nearly faded into silence, lingering only in the margins of other people's books, quoted by grammarians, referenced by philosophers, or dropped into lectures as examples of tricky Greek grammar. Nobody cared much about the emotion. They were just using her like a vocabulary flashcard. Still, even through these dry academic detours, her feelings seeped through. Then, centuries later, desert winds shifted. Imagine being an archaeologist in the late 19th century, digging through the garbage heaps of Oxyrhynchus in Egypt. The sun is brutal, your hands are cracked, and you're sifting through ancient trash. And suddenly, tucked between layers of old receipts and laundry lists, you spot a scrap of poetry, the unmistakable rhythm of Sappho. It's like finding a handwritten note from your favorite songwriter in a pile of receipts at a flea market. More discoveries followed. In 2004, a nearly intact poem turned up, wrapped around a mummy in a German collection. Every new fragment felt like a resurrection, a voice rising from the dust, refusing to stay dead. And yet the gaps are still yawning. You read her today in echoes, in incomplete thoughts, in the ache of what's missing. Let's be real. What you want isn't just what Sappho managed to write down. You want what she would have said if nobody had been looking over her shoulder, if history hadn't kept interrupting her with fire, censorship, and neglect. And maybe, in a twisted way, there's something perfect about that. Sappho wrote about impermanence, about beauty that slips through your fingers like sand. Her poetry is longing incarnate. So, yes, it's strangely fitting that we receive her words as a puzzle, not a monument, a riddle that lovers and scholars have been piecing together in candlelight and boardrooms for centuries. A voice nearly drowned by fire, still burning in the ash. Here's the thing. Sappho's poetry was always too honest to escape judgment. In her own lifetime, she was celebrated, a rock star among lyric poets, the envy of every aspiring writer from Athens to Sicily. Plato, not exactly known for handing out compliments, called her the 10th Muse. That's like being inducted into the Songwriters' Hall of Fame by Beyoncé. But as centuries ticked by, her legacy got tangled up in the insecurities and anxieties of later generations. Why? Because she wrote about love, and not the sanitized Hollywood-approved kind. Sappho's verses were drenched in longing for women. She praised their beauty, mourned their absence, confessed jealousy, and celebrated intimacy in a way that would make even modern audiences blush. In her own world, this wasn't strange. On Lesbos, especially among the aristocratic women, intense emotional and maybe romantic relationships were not just tolerated, they were woven into the fabric of daily life. But as Roman, Christian, and Victorian values took over, Sappho's truth became too inconvenient. Instead of wrestling with her honesty, scholars and scribes simply rewrote her story. Medieval copyists ignored her. Renaissance translators toned down her language, like an awkward parent skipping scenes in an R-rated movie. The Victorians, clutching their pearls, recast her as a tragic figure pining for a man, even going so far as to invent the myth of her leaping off a cliff for the love of a ferryman named Phaon. You can almost see the scene. The white cliffs of Lefkada, Sappho standing dramatically at the edge, wind whipping her hair, a moody male figure in the background. Cue the swelling orchestra. But there's no evidence for this. The story is pure fan fiction, a convenient way to erase her queerness, to turn her heartbreak into something more palatable for straight audiences. Some critics tried to sanitize her poetry, chalking it up to educational or platonic affection. Others dismissed her entirely, branding her as indecent. And yet, through all the scandal and whitewashing, Sappho's name kept echoing. By the 19th century, when just mentioning same-sex desire in public could get you thrown out of polite society, Sappho's legacy started to take on a new, subversive power. Her name became a secret password, a coded symbol for queer identity. Think about it. The words sapphic and lesbian, terms now used worldwide for women who love women, are rooted directly in her name and her island. Sappho became, whether she planned it or not, a figure of resistance, a poetic ancestor for anyone whose love had to be whispered. Even today the debates rage on. Was she a teacher, a lover, a myth, a threat? But maybe the better question is, why are we still so afraid of her truth? Sappho didn't write for categories. She wrote from the gut. She named beauty, confessed longing, and lived through verse. If there was scandal, it wasn't in her actions. It was in her honesty. She dared to say desire out loud, and for that, history tried to hush her. But it never quite worked. If there was a divine presence haunting Sappho's poetry, it was Aphrodite, goddess of love, beauty, and all the messy chemistry that keeps mortals awake at night. To Sappho, Aphrodite wasn't just a mythological celebrity. She was a muse, a confidant, a cosmic drinking buddy who listened to every heartbreak. Many of Sappho's most powerful verses are prayers, not just poems, pleas and negotiations with the goddess when longing got too heavy to carry. In her most famous surviving work, Sappho doesn't just praise Aphrodite. She addresses her directly, almost as if she's phoning a friend who's heard this rant before. Picture yourself in Sappho's sandals, reciting, "Come to me now. If ever you have answered my voice in the past, free me from this hard care. Fulfill what my heart longs for." There's no shame in that vulnerability, no fear in voicing desire. Sappho's love isn't sinful or weak. It's divine, powerful enough to summon a goddess. In ancient Greece, Aphrodite didn't just preside over romance. She ruled every kind of attraction, the ache, the thrill, the unbearable tension of wanting what you can't have. To call on her was to accept that love could wound as much as it could heal. Sappho understood that perfectly. She lived in love's contradictions. In one fragment she writes, "Love shook my soul like the wind on the mountain, troubling the oak trees." Love to her isn't gentle or polite. It's a force of nature, a storm that doesn't ask your permission before it tears through your life. By putting Aphrodite at the center of her world, Sappho blurred the line between the personal and the divine, between ordinary heartbreak and cosmic drama. For her, longing was a form of worship. Aphrodite wasn't just a statue or a story. She was a mirror, reflecting back everything wild, confusing, and beautiful about being human. Every time Sappho wrote, the goddess listened and, in her own way, replied. And then, of course, there's the question. Everyone asks about Sappho. How did she die? Let's smash the myth once and for all. No ancient source with any credibility ever claimed that Sappho hurled herself off a cliff for the love of a man named Phaon. That's a much later invention, cooked up by poets who couldn't handle a woman who loved women being the main character. It's a neat Hollywood ending, but it's also a lie, a way to turn Sappho into a cautionary tale for straight audiences. The real story? We don't know. Sappho's death is as enigmatic as her poetry. Some say she died peacefully on Lesbos, surrounded by the sea and the songs she cherished. Others just shrug and admit that history, as usual, wasn't taking notes. What matters is what happened after. For centuries, her poems were studied, quoted, and performed. She was as famous as Homer, her verses filling the air at festivals and private gatherings alike. But then the world changed. The Roman Empire rose and fell. Christianity took over. And Sappho's works, especially the ones that dared to celebrate female love, were left to rot, consigned to library shelves that would one day burn or crumble. Some believe her books were deliberately destroyed by church officials who saw them as dangerous. By the Middle Ages, Sappho was little more than a name, her words mostly gone. It took over 1,000 years before fragments of her poetry re-emerged, rescued from Egyptian garbage dumps or quoted in the margins of ancient textbooks. Piece by piece, she was reborn, not through myth, but through stubborn survival. She lingers in stolen lines, in scribbled notes, in the persistent ache of voices that refuse to be forgotten. Sappho didn't need a dramatic death to achieve immortality. Her poems had already done the job. Even in the empty spaces where her words used to be, you can still sense her shape, the yearning, the unfinished longing, the refusal to disappear. Her life may be half shadow, her verses scattered, but her influence is like a stubborn candle, flickering but never going out. Every age rediscovers her. In the Renaissance, scholars pored over her fragments, marveling at her ability to say so much with so little. In the Romantic era, poets like Byron and Shelley invoked her name as a kind of spell. And when the world finally started talking, really talking, about gender and identity, Sappho became a symbol of queer resilience, of feminine artistry, of emotional freedom. A name is in our language itself. Sapphic love, lesbian desire. These aren't just words. They are echoes of her existence, proof that a single voice can ripple through millennia and still change how we talk about love. Artists, writers, musicians, all are drawn to her. Painters imagine her at her lyre, moonlight on her shoulders. Poets translate her, again and again, searching for the heartbeat under each line. Modern novelists reimagine her, reclaim her, resurrect her in songs and stories. Through it all, one thing never changes. Sappho speaks to something universal. It doesn't matter that her poems are broken. It doesn't matter that her biography is a blur. What matters is the emotion that burns through the gaps, the trembling joy of desire, the sacredness of beauty, the ache of being human. These are feelings, you know. Everyone knows them. Sappho just found a way to sing them so clearly that they still echo 2,000 years later. Maybe that's her true immortality. Not marble statues or dusty footnotes, but the way a line from an ancient poet can still make you pause, breathe, and feel less alone. Sappho's gift wasn't just poetry. It was presence. She made feeling an art. She turned longing into truth. And in doing so, she became a mirror for anyone who ever loved in defiance of the world, or in silence, or with all their heart. As long as people turn to language to break and heal their hearts, Sappho will remain. Not just remembered, felt. Alive in every unfinished line, every quiet moment of longing, every act of courage that refuses to let desire be silenced.